So let's start by telling viewers. Well, you can tell viewers all about yourself and a quick snapshot of what your YouTube channel is all about.
Oh, me. I'm an old bloke who rides a bike occasionally, and the channel's called Always Another Adventure, and it's two things. It's a podcast and it's a YouTube channel. The podcast strapline is Great Adventurers Tell Their Great Adventures. And it started during lockdown when I thought all these people have got nothing to listen to, and there's a whole load of people who normally go off and have big adventures who aren't not allowed to do that. So I thought, well, why don't we try and chat to them? So we're doing this sort of thing, but mainly in audio. And it's just evolved since then. Try and go for things that interest me, and I try to do something really honest and fair with the reviews. I'm not one of these people who just takes stuff and then bullshits about it. And again, during the pandemic, we started a thing which is stuff cyclists don't tell you, and that was for new and returning cyclists, because a lot of folks did come back to cycling. So that was it, really. There's a YouTube channel and there's a podcast, and me sitting in the middle of it, and it's really just a hobby, a lifestyle hobby that motivates me to get out and ride my bike. Actually,
a lot of people who start watching your channel will instantly recognise your voice from somewhere, and they'll probably question themselves, well, where have I heard that voice? So you had a bit of a career. What was you doing prior to being on YouTube?
So many people say to me, oh, you sound just like John Craven.
Yes.
I actually don't hear
I would
it
agree.
myself. I can't hear that. And I've met John, and I've said to John, do you think we sound alike? And he's like, what? And who are you? I used to work for the BBC as a TV reporter. I've worked on Radio 4, I've worked for Newsnight, and northeast of England, I was better known there because I did a lot in the regions. And then I came up to BBC Scotland, and I started our version of Newsnight and did that for a long time until I retired. So I'm a Geordie, and you can hear it, but it's there. But it probably got battered down a wee bit in the aid of comprehension. And now occasionally you hear bits of Scots creeping.
So you talked about John Craven there. I wonder if it's because, did you ever have do some nature sections or anything on Country File?
No, I didn't. I did a few things for Craven's News Round, actually, because I'm a bit younger than John. Not much, but a bit younger. So I did a few things for his programme. I haven't done anything for Country File. It's been mainly news and current affairs. So I always went through my life looking for a row, trying to find the downside of things. And when I retired, I started working for a programme in Scotland called The Adventure Show. So I was producing and I was shooting for them and what have you, and that was fantastic because we were getting out doing triathlons and cycling and swimming and all sorts of stuff, and that's got me to that's the stuff I really like doing, and probably gave me the foundation and probably the background to why I wanted to keep doing that. When that sort of work dried up, I thought, well, keep doing that for YouTube, just really for my own benefit.
It always when it came to when I was hearing your voice, I was thinking to myself, I can't remember watching a lot of Newsnight in my youth, but straight away I was like, I just know that voice.
I do actually, and always have got recognised far more for my voice, which is weird, than me. But there again, you got to imagine me with hair, and no glasses. You see that? I look
Where was the last time you was on the BBC? Then how are you retired now?
Hang on a second. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you a stills picture and you can cut that in of me when I was on Newsnight. This was Newsnight Scotland, and it was probably 2008, and I was presenting the programme. I did occasionally, and Gordon Brewer was the main presenter, and I did it when he was on holiday.
So you've got this YouTube channel now. It's been going for a while. So let's talk about the last 12 months. What your highlights been?
I think the highlights for me are always the adventures, and judging by the views, I hope they are the ones that people like most. Because I've shot a lot of stuff, the way telly and some of the more professional channels used to do it, there's always like a vehicle support. You always shoot a bit and then drive the next bit, because everybody's working to a budget. There's overnights to pay for. There's a presenter, usually costs a fortune, and there's all this sort of stuff. And so what I think the democratization of video, the idea that a GoPro has now got good enough to shoot in 5.3K with the new one, it means that people can actually go out and really film their adventures. So that's a huge plus, and don't underestimate how much it is, because GCN has changed. I mean, the way GCN does it now, the last thing that Hank and Mark Beaumont did, I know the route they did through Noida to get to Doon. I'm going off topic a little bit, but I'll get back to it in a minute. I know that route, I've walked it. My goodness, I wouldn't take a bike there, but it was real. And they had someone else with them, filming them with a small, lightweight camera. You saw it, it's a really, really good piece. And it is so different to the way they would have done it in the past with a vehicle they'd be meeting up with, doing a bit. And that's what I think they've had to change, because there's been more of us producing better and better content that, I want to use the word honest. It's not that theirs is dishonest, but it's not quite the edge that ours are. So the adventures that I'm really pleased with, going back to your question about the highlights, one where I rode, it's a common run-off route, across Scotland and back in a weekend, from Bonnarbridge to Ullapool and then back again. This was a route that I helped to pioneer back in 1995, and we found that route by looking at a Unipart road atlas. There wasn't literally nothing in the middle. I thought, oh, that's got to be interesting. And then got the OAS maps out and did the whole thing. It's now a very commonly ridden route, and I just wanted to know, could I still do it 25 years later, and by myself this time instead of with a whole posse of lads. So that was probably one of my highlights. I was actually just pulling a bit of video from that for something I was cutting before we started. But actually, this time last year, I was doing the Torino-Nice Rally, and that has to be one of the highlights, just because of where it was and the riding, and also I think the best ones, and I think these make the best films actually, are where the outcome is uncertain. And you genuinely, I had no idea whether I could ride that, whether my bike would hold up, whether I would hold up. And likewise, it was only 2 days, the one across to Ullapool and back, because it was meant to be good weather and it wasn't. Yeah, that whole thing. So I would say those two are two of my highlights, although I had a really good one in June as well, but yeah.
So many, yeah.
Well,
I was going to talk about the Torino-Nice Rally later on, but since you mentioned it,
okay.
I remember watching it, and it's probably around the time I started watching your channel. So can you explain to viewers what that's all about? Okay,
well, Torino-Nice there's some friends of mine just finished it. I need to catch up with them and see how they did. So it starts in Turin and it finishes in Nice. And a guy called James Olson a few years ago went to the Alps with his friends, and they were literally trying to find a way through. They were trying to stick as best they could to the old military roads that were blasted high into the Italian Alps, that they cling to the mountainside. And he came up with a really good route. And off the back of that, more and more people wanted to do it. And I've actually got an interview like this that I did with James on my channel. So he can, if you want to go to that, he can give the full details of it. He's shared the route with other people, and it became a very popular thing to ride. The year I did it last year, I think it was the last of the, I want to say, organized ones, because with 200 people starting in the center of Turin, and it could only be 200 people, there were kind of permit issues as to assembly and all this thing, even though it was very early in the morning. So I think, and I apologize if I'm wrong, James, I think he had to do it in a different way this year. He had to do it, well, it's happening, if you want to turn up and do it, great, go ahead and do it. But I know a lot of people have ridden it. He's had to tweak the route slightly over the years, because one of the roads that I went down is now completely out of bounds. I shouldn't have gone down it, but people are now being fined for going down it. So
Was that called the Death Valley or Death Road?
That was the nickname that was given to it, the Death Road, because it was just from Stonefall. That it was literally being reclaimed by nature. It had been abandoned, and it was just being bombarded. And that video's had, I think it's 90,000 views, and it's somewhere in the middle of it. And it did feel scary to begin with. It was like, oh, this is really quite good, and then it was like, hang on a second. So you'll see I've done setups with a camera and I've gone past it, but every time I've done that, the camera has been in a shelter, in a protected bit, because there still are protected bits on the way down, and I've just gone back and ridden just a few yards to get the shot.
And from time to time there was cars up there?
Yeah, that's the thing that surprised me most, was the fact that because you don't see it in the photographs that people post about this wonderful out there place, is the fact that sometimes you are sharing the road with vehicles up there in the mountains. And I went a day early for boring reasons, and I encountered a big rally, so the first couple of days were a bit of a pain. But the fact that some of these roads are open to, and this stones, think of really, really rough forest track. That's what the ground's like. And yet there's people taking BMW Tourings along there. You know, it's like, God, I wouldn't take my ancient old car up there. But anyway, people are doing this, and a lot of motorbikes, a lot of Germans in their big sort of four-wheel drive. Not being racist, there were a lot of Germans. And that was a bit of a surprise. But it was good at the start and end of the day when they all disappeared down to the valley, because you've got all these beautiful places to yourself. And actually the bang was worth the buck. It was worth putting up with that to be in some of these fantastic places.
Yeah, there's often a compromise, isn't there?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So you're cycling up to you've explained you're cycling up to this point. What you don't describe yourself as a cyclist as such, do you? Describe yourself as somebody who is out there enjoying the great outdoors?
That was it, yeah. I sent you a little synopsis of me, and I said, I'm not really I only got my first road bike in 2008, just before I retired. I used to ride my wife's, although I did have an old tourer. Yeah, for me, it's always about the journey, whether it's with a backpack on, and we walked the length of America, a thing called the Pacific Crest Trail. It took us 6 months from Mexico to Canada. We sea kayaked the west coast of Scotland and wrote a guidebook about, because that was for a guidebook. And we did 3 sea kayaking films, still being sold, and they're based around journeys, because it's always the journey that's important. And I did my first cycle journey in 1991, when I did the then little known pilgrim route to Santiago. And God, if you have cycle anywhere around Saint-Jean now, you can't get moved for pilgrims. And I think that's largely due to that film, The Way, with Martin Sheen, and it's been in loads of TV programs. I mean, when I did it, I'm pretty sure saying if you were sentenced to community service in Belgium, you could actually do this as a kind of a punishment instead. So, it was 3 of us stayed the night at Roncesvalles Monastery, and now, God, I think you'd be beating them off with sticks. People are the ones who always make the journey, and when you think back on a journey, there are moments, but it's often the folks you meet along the way. I'm thinking about the TNR. And yeah, some groups of riders who I was with. It's a bit different when you've got a camera with you, because, if you're in a group of people and you're just having a really good evening and you think, oh, this is a really key part it's going to be a great part of the film, you don't want to be the idiot who pulls out a camera and stands back. Because you've got to not be that person.
And sometimes if you do try that, sometimes it kills the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Could you just say that again?
Yeah, it don't work.
Although, and there's something else, is when you are doing that from my work, when I was using a camera, you actually wouldn't want to be part of the conversation. You wouldn't have started the conversation. You wouldn't have joined in it. And you'd have been standing back with the camera on your shoulder, and you'd just be listening in. And so there's an element of separation that comes in, I think, with filmmaking, rightly or wrongly.
I say you've not been riding for that many years, but you must have been out there and it's like in what they call the bonk. You know, you've ridden all day long and you're absolutely exhausted, or you've not drank enough. What sort of experiences have you had in that?
I'm not sure. A few years ago, I did some stuff for. It's when Science and Sport. They did this thing, sort of an academy of sport, and it was really just they were trying to get people who wrote blogs and things. I don't think I was YouTubing at the time, and I made a few films about the experience. But I got to speak to one of the nutritionists who. James Morton, who went on to work for Sky. He was at Liverpool University, and he was the guy who introduced me to the idea of fasted training. So I think going out without eating, and then for your Sunday ride, I think that was the closest I ever got to bonking. Usually I'm festooned with bars and stuff because I don't like this idea of being hungry.
Snacking is the way forward, isn't it? You just got to snack, eat as much as you can.
Absolutely. And real food, if possible. Real food. I mean, I was out yesterday. It wasn't a big ride. I think it's 45 miles, but more than half of it off-road. And, I had my porridge before I left. I had some food at roughly the halfway point, and that was it. Didn't bother with anything else. Just two bottles of water. I'm a bit of a bugger for not drinking enough water, especially when you're out camping. If you're out overnight, you're hoarding your water for the night time, and so you end up not drinking enough during the day. Yeah, that happened the other weekend.
It's surprising how much you drink when you're not on your bike for like 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah, but the other thing is you don't want to be getting up in the night and going pee. I mean,
true.
That's what I do. Not in Scotland, not with the midges around and rain and stuff. So you want to avoid that. So actually, there's a balance there. And I have 2 bottles, and one's a filter bottle. It's got a filter in the top, so you can just fill it up if needs be. But you don't want to pee in that bottle by mistake. That would be a real mistake.
So with you living in Scotland, it's such an amazing place to ride a bike. There must have been many journeys up there, and people like me south of the border. Perhaps some of us have ridden Land's End John O'Groats, and we've just had a fleeting experience, or we've dreamt of doing the NC 500 or something like that. Is anything for you in Scotland that perhaps would be on your own bucket list, places you've not visited yet?
Yeah, it was just fairly recently I got over to ride the snow roads. I did a podcast with Lee Craigie, and we'd arranged to meet, and she lives over on the far side of the Cairngorms, and it's a devil to drive to from where I am on the west coast. But I thought, can I ride there? Would that work out? So I went to somewhere part way, and then I rode the distance because I thought that way I can do a little bit of off-road, and then I can ride at least some of the snow roads over the left. And that was one I've wanted to ride for quite a long time. And I think that was like 2 videos ago that I put that out. So that was quite good fun. And then rode into Aberdeen. I didn't really know Aberdeen at all. And I still don't know Aberdeen at all because I hadn't realised that the D-side way, being on an old railway line, goes right to the railway station. Yeah. So you don't actually see anything of Aberdeen. But yeah, where would I like to ride? My answer would have been Dumfries and Galloway and the Borders, but we did a thing called the Rome Scotland Rally this year, Liz and myself, and we got to see it was held this year, it was down that way, so that was 7 days of bikepacking, and so we did that around the Borders and Dumfries and Galloway, so we got to see a good bit of that. I think the Borders definitely has more to offer. But I'm going to pick you up on one thing, and that's the North Coast 500. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of grown in popularity, probably too much, I think.
Yeah, you see, I know you said to me you want to talk later about my plans for next year, and so I'm going to jump a little bit with that, but let me just go back a bit. If you get it at the right time of year, if you go in April or now, perhaps, it's not bad. But I was up there 3 weekends ago, and there's a little village called Clactol, which I did some work in, did some filming in 2001. And during the day, you never saw a soul. I mean, if you'd wanted to do a Vox Pop, there'd be no one there. We had to arrange to meet someone from the Ascent Crofters. Now, there must be 50 or 60 touring camper vans and cars with tents on one campsite. And that's just a little village in the northwest of Scotland. And it's a fantastic route to ride, but you're sharing the road with rental camper vans driven by people who normally drive small cars in cities, and now they're on very narrow roads. So I've got a bit of a down on it in a way, and I have a friend who came over to ride it this year from Canada, and he had a fantastic time. He really enjoyed it. He said, it's not as bad as you think, Simon. So maybe my opinion is coloured, but I think there should be a West Coast 500 that only cyclists can do. So it involves a bit of rough gravel. So going to places that you cannot take a car. So that's kind of my plan. And I was away recently doing some stuff, because we've got these islands, you know, we've got some great islands. So yesterday I was just checking out a route on the north end of Mull, another route at the bottom end. And then last week I was down, going from Oban down to a place called Tevalach and going out on the summer boat. Went round Jura, Isla, and then I tried to get back because there was meant to be a ferry back up to Oban, and they cancelled the ferry, so I ended up with a 92-mile day fully loaded to get back up. But yeah, and so I'm going to try and work on that over the winter, because lots of people have suggested ideas for routes. But I'm looking for, I need a business that can get behind it and promote it. But I think a West Coast route that's got gravel in it, that so it excludes cars, I think that might work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a big place, isn't it? You know, you can still find, like you mentioned there about going out at different times of year. So, you know, I think if you time it right, you can enjoy it and still get away from cars. But I'm starting to move towards gravel riding a bit more. So for me, it kind of appeals to go get away from cars.
That's true for a lot of people. And also I've just been playing with a review bike. It's called an all-road bike, and it was a new idea to me. It's like an endurance bike, but it's got massive clearances on. And I'm riding that, and it's a road bike. You know, it's got a short back end, it's got a cutaway seat tube, and I'm riding that it's got pretty much slick tires. I'm riding that in places where, my goodness, you know, I would expect only to use a gravel bike. And so this idea of needing specialist bike to do that, it's going out the window. And all these categories, I'm actually putting a video together now. It's not really a very serious thing, but talking about, well, we need to rethink our categories, actually, of what bike falls into what category.
Yeah, is there a bike that can just do it all?
I don't think there's a do-it-all, but I think if we're talking drop handlebar things, I think the road bike thing has changed, so you've got the aero and the race bike. But the endurance bike, I mean, if you look at the clearances on the new Specialized Roubaix or the Madone or lots of these things, they've got bigger clearances than my first gravel bike had. You know, it's getting crackers. And then you've got the sort of bikes that they're using on GB Duro, which are race gravel bikes that you probably do not want to load up with big tents and all this stuff that are out, you know, when you're going out for a long period of time. So yeah, anyway, just some thoughts.
It can never replace a true mountain bike, but it gets pretty close, doesn't it?
Well, I don't. Well, my mountain bike. We've got one that's kind of lives outside, and it's our way for getting down to the village and back. I might have to use it. I'm doing an off-road triathlon next weekend, but they said if you're skillful, you can use a gravel bike. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope I can use a gravel bike. And if I can't, I'll carry the thing. It's much lighter than my mountain bike.
Okay, so let's talk about your channel a bit more. Where do you get your ideas from, and what sort of things have you learnt along the way in terms of the filming, bringing ideas together, and telling a story?
I think in a way, I'm unusual in that for a lot of YouTubers, in that I had a way of doing that when I started YouTubing. I kind of knew about shots and the order in which to works to put them together, like a 5-shot sequence, how to build a 5-shot sequence, and the use of music and what have you. I think I came with a knowledge of structure because I've made hour-long 2-hour-long documentaries for the Beeb, and so it's a bit different. I come to it, then I have to work out how YouTube wants it. And YouTube's a very different beast in that respect. I mean, jump cuts are the norm, and you know, you've got to grab people in the first 30 seconds. There's no sort of, or less. You've got that metric, haven't you, that you can see as to when the fall off happens and how quickly. And if 80% of people are watching at 30 seconds, it's brilliant. If 50% are watching, it's average. It's kind of phenomenal, that. So I think that's been what I have learned, is a little bit about the YouTube channel. But I try not to be motivated by that. I try to do things that interest me. Rather than, I mean, there's a way of doing YouTube that and there are a whole lot of people on YouTube that will explain this far better than I could, that is all about find your niche and then get even more niche and then hammer that blooming niche until it bleeds. And so given my age, I'm 64, I'll be 65 soon, I should be hammering a niche for older cyclists, fitness, and all this kind of stuff. The channel should be called Old Man on a Bike or something like that, and stay fit, or fit after 60, or something like that. That doesn't really interest me that much. Although the mechanics of it do, I just don't want to be that bloke. So I'm not. And I just rather, like, the idea came to me for this West Coast 500, which may not be 500.
And do you really want to pigeon yourself into that anyway, you know?
But I think when people do that, that's how they succeed a bit in YouTube. Yes. And the other thing is, I don't want to be like a lifestyle vlogger. No, not trying to denigrate some really good cycling vloggers who do this, but that's so personality led, and it's all about what I'm doing now. I did a little bit of it, but it's not for me. I'd rather tell a story about something rather than just, hi, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there, Simon. There's lots of vlogs out there, and for me, it doesn't do it for me. I'd rather go on an adventure and share the trip.
Exactly. Do you find yourself saying we? Because I find, as in, I find that camera, I find that being the person I'm going with, and I'll say, we're now going to be doing something like that, and it's just like, hang on a second, it's not we, it's me. But actually, I do feel. Do you find yourself doing that at all, or is it just me?
I haven't slipped into that yet. I'm more about the I, the me.
All right.
But I still find it a little bit irritating when I watch other people and they're saying we all the time.
All right. Well, I apologise.
Isn't that irritating? If I wasn't a YouTuber myself, I probably wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to be irritating you. I'll have to try and pull back from.
I don't know, sometimes it's subconscious. Because
It is, because I find it really cathartic sometimes to open up to the camera and just talk about, and just sort of like... And also it helps when things go... Did you find this? Because you had this epic recently. Did you find it better to be able to almost be an observer of your condition by explaining it to the camera? When something bad happens to you, given you have to talk about it and explain what's happened, did it help in the process, the fact that you felt almost you had someone with you that you were talking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an eye-opener, because I've had a lot of, these last 4 weeks I've not spent time in front of the camera, so it's been a kind of a break from that, and it's been I don't do so many videos like that where I'm sharing sort of my journeys off the bike. More my journeys are generally me enjoying myself out on the bike, and I don't share my my thoughts and my feelings very much in front to the camera.
It's just when things go wrong, that's usually when things get good. You know, that's when the video gets good, is when things
I know what you mean. I've seen my
and I've been in situations where I've thought, right, well, I wonder what's going to happen now. You know, and that's quite good. So you think, let's see how we get out of this one.
Sometimes when you look at your numbers, your views and things like that, although I had to try not to look into it too much, it's kind of think, well, if I fall off again, I might get more views. You know what I mean? People are interested in the bad stuff.
Yeah,
it's really weird, you know.
But I mean, years ago, some people were asking me with the sea kayaking stuff, you know, how do we film up? Because this is a little bit before the good GoPros. How do we film our expedition? And I pretty much talked most of them out of it. And it was like, because really, it's when things are really at their worst that you have to press the record button and start filming. And yeah, it's hard to do.
There was an experience last year, actually. I did the Transcontinental race.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was difficult to film all the way through. Predominantly, my footage from that, the part that I filmed the most was actually when it kind of didn't go wrong. It was just kind of interesting. There was a parkour towards the end of that race, and it was pushing the bike a lot. It was off-road gravel, and I got very emotional on that.
Yeah,
as you can imagine, and those kind of videos, I think it resonated with the viewers better.
So you started with that, did you? You put that right at the front of your video?
Yes, I think I did, yeah.
Yes, because that's the best bit, and you start with your best bit.
Yeah, people like when things don't quite go to plan, I think.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because there's so much polished content out there, and you don't see it that often on telly.
People like the honesty, don't they?
Exactly.
No, I think because we go on these myself and we go on these great journeys, but it never quite goes to plan, and people like to see the things that go wrong. You know, sometimes you feel like you're recording all the great stuff.
But adventures start when things don't go to plan.
So I've just recently noticed you started doing podcasts. Is that a new series? How did that come about? Is there more of those to come?
I started in March 2020, right at the start of lockdown. I mentioned this earlier that I figured that I previously had a podcast called Sea Kayak Podcasts, which I've only just managed to salvage because the host went bust. And I just thought, well, there's all these people who can't go out who normally would be having great adventures, and there's all these people who can't go out and have their own adventures, so why don't the great adventurers share their great adventures with these people? So I started that, and it's just kind of evolved. I took a little bit of a break because it was becoming a bit of a voracious beast to feed.
So I've seen you on your podcast, you did spoke to Josh Ibbott. Was that back in 2020 then, or was that more recent?
Spoke to Josh twice, actually, and we had all sorts of fun. We're doing it up here in the upstairs of our house, and we couldn't work out where the audio interference was coming from, but he's using the headphones that have got like the built-in mic, and it was just rubbing on his zip. And couldn't work out where it was, and that turned out to be that. No, I spoke to him during the pandemic when we were all kind of locked down. And I've put a bunch of these recently on YouTube, which is maybe where you've seen it now, because YouTube's actually encouraging people to put podcasts up. But I also spoke to him after he won GB Duro a few years ago. So yeah, I've had two with Josh. Lovely guy. I don't know him, but yeah, I've had him. There's been Mark Beaumont. There's been Jenny Graham, Lee Craigie, as I say, Emily Chappell. Lots of by missing people out here, it sounds bad. So but anyway, there's a load of good cyclists in there on the podcast, and yeah, it did change a little bit. But I've got a one coming Next, which will be on the 1st of October, I'm not sure when this is going out, which will be with the woman who has just recently broken my mate Donny Campbell's record for doing all Scotland's Munros, the 282 of them, self-propelled, Jamie Aarons. So, and then after that, if all goes to plan, I've got one that I recorded in the summer while we were doing the Rome Scotland Rally, so people can know all about that and the plans for next year. And then after that, if working a little bit in advance, I've got one that we did during Ride to the Sun, which was literally on the longest day. So I thought if we can put that out nearer Christmas, it might give some people some ideas for a ride to do next summer.
Sounds like plenty to look forward to. And so, touching on the Ride to the Sun there, I love the longest day. I always try and gear something around it. The summer solstice, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever do anything on the winter solstice?
I did I tried for the first time last year. But to be honest, I can't remember what I was doing now. I think I might have done like a 200-kilometre Audax or something like that. I thought I'd give it a go on the 21st December, I think it was, or thereabouts.
Yeah, the Ride to the Sun guys do one called Ride to the Pub, which is a very short one, which I think is a great idea, and you can join them for that. But yeah, I keep meaning to do something, but usually up here it's a bit cold, wet and horrible, and you just don't feel like going out on the bike.
Like I say, I can't remember whether I did something in winter now, because I often gear myself up to do like the Rafa 500 as my way of motivating myself out the door.
It's a great thing. My wife's family is from down south, so we're forever driving around over Christmas. And it was actually during the pandemic year where we couldn't socialise that one Christmas at the end of 2020 that we stayed home, and I could actually do the Rafa 500 for the first time. And that was great. I mean, the pandemic was a bit rubbish, but yeah, that bit of it was good. And so previously, and this year again, I'll probably be doing the same. Probably have to drive down to Dorset.
Yeah, and lovely place to visit as well over Christmas time. The weather's a lot different.
Yeah, it is. North. It's good, but it's not. But getting there, driving. Actually, we're going to look and see if we might even take the train if we can, but there's issues there as well and what have you. So taking a bike on some of these long distance trains, still a bit of a pain.
That's assuming you can get on the train in the first place.
Indeed. Yeah, if they're not on strike, and they will be.
So of all the videos that you've ever put out on your channel, I think you touched on the Torino-Nice one earlier, but is there any others that kind of stand out, which will, kind of maybe in terms of the editing, kind of what's the most been proud of, really bringing together the story?
Okay. I have known a chap called Richard Else. There's a podcast with him since 1983, because we both worked in Newcastle together. And he has been a pioneer of adventure filmmaking. He's done a lot for the BBC. He did all the Edge, all the climbing series and what have you. He was a judge at Banff at the film festival, and he ran workshops there. And there was one video recently that I sent to him because I was particularly pleased with it, and I said, I just want you to see this and see what you can do nowadays with a drone and a GoPro. And it was a ride, again it was a cross Scotland thing. I think I called it the Highland Fling. There is a thing called the Highland Fling. It wasn't the Highland Fling, but and it was from Bewley through Glen Affric, and then down some really rough roads into Kintail and stayed at a youth hostel. So that was across in a day, and then from Kintail, it's over the pass Rattigan on the little Skye ferry. It was a route that I had done with a team from Cyclist magazine quite a few years ago, and then up over and then down, then to Broadford, towards Broadford, but turning off, coming back over the Skye Bridge, and then getting the train back. And I was really pleased with the way that went together. Sometimes when you're making a video, and this applies for telly as well as just YouTube. Some days everything clicks, and you've not got to be frightened. The phrase is "kill your babies." You can have shot this wonderful sequence, But if it doesn't, when you come to editing, if it doesn't just quite sit there because you need to move through that, you've just got to throw it away, even if it's got the nicest shots in it, because you've got to get a bit of pace. And it just worked. I was very pleased with that one. So Highland Fling, if anybody wants to go to Always Another Adventure and have a look at the Highland Fling video, I hope they enjoy it, because I like that one. I think that's quite good. And it's also a belting route. I always put the routes on Komoot in the GPS below if people want to do it. So it's a hard route on a mountain bike, mind. It's part of the Highland Trail 550, and yeah, it's tough, but it's very rewarding.
Spoke earlier about your plans for the next few months in terms of your podcasts, but what about other your trips and adventures into next year maybe?
It's that West Coast 500. I've got a sort of a line on a map, as it were, but you've got to ride it. So I'm going to try and do that if I can in bite-sized bits over winter. And then early spring or May or something, I'll probably try and ride the whole thing in a one-er. It'll probably be a 2-week ride or something like that. But I've also got wind of a new long-distance French gravel trail that is being created over this winter. They're kind of putting it together. I don't shout too much about it because I don't know whether or not it's going to be ready, and the people who are doing it will not thank me for getting them inundated. But I quite fancy doing that because I do like riding in France, and my French isn't that bad. I'll be doing my Duolingo, so they're the two plans really. I've got not much in the way of sort of tests planned, but I've got a few, and yeah, that's it really. I try not to plan too much because you got to get on with life, haven't you? It's not really all about YouTube and podcasts and what have you. This is just a bit of icing on a cake, but stuff that motivates you to get out and actually ride the bike.
It's nice to do things spontaneously as well, rather than I do a lot of spontaneous stuff. Rather than go, okay, right, this is my plans 3 months in advance. I'm useless at calendars and things.
The only reason I have the podcasts so far in advance is because Lee's book came out, and then somebody said, you really should speak to Jamie. And I was like, oh, right, I should do. And so I had to slide everything down. Normally it's like, crikey, what we're going to do at the end of the month? God, it's only 3 days away. How about you? What about your cycling plans? What have you had any scuppered apart from PBP, obviously?
Well, my 2 big plans, both next year. Have you heard of Badlands?
Yes, just happened, hasn't it?
So I want to do that next September. But before that,
I think Josh Reed's just done a video on that, I should imagine, because he was riding.
Yes, I've seen quite a few people riding Badlands putting videos up just recently. Chris Hall and Josh Reed as well.
700 kilometers, so he's not going to take a sleeping system. That's about what he can manage without sleep.
That's kind of that was my takeaway from watching that.
Amazes me that, I mean, I'm not this sort of a long distance rider. I mean, PBP would be way beyond what my kind of riding. That's not really my sort of thing at all. But it does impress me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine riding that distance without some sort of sleep system.
I took 10 days to do 7.
But apart from Badlands, next year I want to visit Tenerife. Go up Mount Tidy, because the last time I went to Tenerife I was still young. It was about drinking and going out clubbing and that kind of thing. So I'd like to, now I've kind of revisited cycling in my middle-aged years, I would like to visit there and go around the island, I think.
Yeah, well, I did a climbing trip there when I was doing that, and we walked in the days when you could. I think we walked right to the top of Tidy or whatever it is. But also some lovely bits in the Laurel Forest, and you can get down lava tubes on the west coast. And you just go into this hole in the ground, and it was massive tube going right through that, and it came out on a cliff face with just a little couple of blocks of concrete to stop you falling into space. Some amazing places on that island. We used to go quite a lot to Lanzarote when I was doing more triathlons, because it's with Club La Santa there. It's a great training place. But yeah, the Canaries are great, especially for winter.
Those are the kind of the two things what I definitely want to do. I mean, I have people go, why don't you do this Grenache thing, which is where it's like an Audax where you visit loads of the islands.
Oh yeah, linking the islands together.
Yeah, I'll think about that one. But I want to do more. The last couple of years I've done a lot of races, ultra races. So next year I'm thinking I want to do something less competitive and just do loads of breaks everywhere. You know what I mean? Do a lot more off-road kind of adventures in preparation for the Badlands. I think that's what I'd like to do next year. So we all watch different YouTubers. Is there any sort of smaller channels that you've started watching recently?
There's nothing springs to mind. I would actually have to have a look on my YouTube to know that, because you don't really know the names of. I don't know the names of them. Actually, sorry, I'm saying no. There's one. Paul. He's not small. Crikey, he's got like 175,000 subscribers. Although subscribers are a vanity metric, it's views that count. Paul Mesner.
Oh yes, yeah.
The reviews tents and stuff. And the lightweight things. I quite like his approach. It's well done, and it's interesting. He's got well into the YouTube ecosystem and monetizing it, and loads of affiliate links and the whole thing, and a secondary gear channel. You know, he's worked it all out, or him and his partner have. So it's quite clearly a business. So yeah, I quite enjoy that sort of stuff.
What sort of other channels? What other sort of people do you watch?
Do you know what it is? I'm quite eclectic in that I might have a load of subscribers, but I kind of trust the YouTube algorithm to a certain extent, and a good thumbnail will get me to click it, and I'll not necessarily know who I'm watching, but if I enjoy it, great, it'll get a thumbs up, and so yeah, I don't necessarily know who's I'm watching sometimes. Yeah, but yeah, I'll let it find it for me. And I watch less actually in the summer when I'm riding my bike than I do in the winter, because you know, when you're on the turbo, that's when you kind of tend to just set up a whole lot of watch laters, and then.
Yeah, absolutely. So we both do the bikepacking sort of thing on our channels, and I often find, and you're probably the same. It's not just cycling videos we watch Paul Mesner. There's a guy I watch called Simon, a bloke in the woods. So he does bushcraft, or the wild camping and things like that. So it's quite a broad topic area. You know, there's lots of crossover.
Yeah, and because we're not all cyclists, are we? It's this whole thing about when people have this motorists v cyclists things. It's utter crap, because most of us are motorists when we're in a car. We're cyclists when we're on a bike. We're hill walkers when we're on the hill. This is what I mean about not being. I don't like being. You're a cyclist. It's the whole outdoors thing.
Fresh air.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're into the outdoors and doing that kind of thing, then most people at heart like that are wired the same way and like the same things. That's why I'm quite happy from the podcast to be quite eclectic to pick runners or swimmers or cyclists. It doesn't have to be as narrow casting on that. A bit broader. I mean, YouTube still likes its niches, but podcasting can be a bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a final question, if you don't mind me asking. How many bikes do you own, or how many bikes is too many, do you think?
Well, it's like always another adventure, isn't it? It's always another bike. I've got three. I've got a gravel race bike. I've got a gravel sort of off-road adventure bike, sort of tourer that you could load down a titanium thing. And I've got a 2010 road bike that is lovely. But at the moment I am riding a review bike, which is a Fara all-road. I was talking about it earlier. And if I had my way, it would be finding its way permanently in the bike shed. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm sure there's lots of other good all-road bikes. I don't necessarily just mean that one. And we have this rusting old mountain bike that, as I say, we use for getting down the village. So no, I think I'm quite restrained in my bikes. I do have a frame somewhere that I need to actually do something with in one of these days, but that doesn't really count as a bike, does it?
I believe when you can have too many bikes, I think.
You've only got one arse.
You've only got, exactly, you can only ride one at a time. So for me, it's kind of, each bike has to serve a purpose, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, quite clearly delineated. Mind you, you can always find a purpose, can't you?
At the moment, I've been off work for a few weeks. Well, working from home for a few weeks. And when I do actually return to work, if I'm going to be cycling there, normally I go on a hybrid. But because I'm a bit shaky at the moment, I'm probably going to go on a gravel bike because of the thicker tyres and things like that. So that's where the lines get blurred a little bit.
I had a great old Clockwork Orange. It was ancient, that I used to commute when I lived in Glasgow and leave my car at work just so if I needed it during the day and come home at night. Although that was quite fun, going through the Clyde Tunnel at night in the dark. There's a separate tunnel for bikes and see a glow of a cigarette somewhere up in front and you think, oh my God, what's about to happen here? But no, it was usually fine.
Well, thank you very much, Simon, for being a guest of the show. It's been fantastic talk.
I'm not usually as good at answering questions as I am at asking them. It's quite weird, actually, but you've been gentle with me, so thank you.
Yeah, I've not have any. I can't think of any pressing questions. I mean, in cycling, it's all very fun, isn't it? We don't,
Yeah, 1x or 2x. I tell you what, do a video about the best bike lube. Then you'll see people's colours. My goodness me, people really get very, very, very jumpy about their choice of bike lubes. That's the one I've had most comments on.
Or rim brakes versus disc brakes.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that. There's that one too. You can find your controversy anyway.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. Take care.
Thank you, and best of luck.